Oh, I did that whole thing with the mute button on. Yeah. So we're going to redo that. Hello, and welcome to Champions of Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. The best part is now I've got practice at reading it. I'm your host, Treavor Bettis, and with me each week are two amazing people that know way more about this than I ever will. Mitra Jordan is a registered clinical counselor with a counseling and psychotherapy practice in Victoria, BC. Raffael Boccamazzo, a.k.a. Dr. B, is the clinical director of Take This and Dabney on Clinical Role. Still messed it up. They'll be talking about mental health in these unprecedented times, as well as how gaming affects us. If you're here with us live in the chat, you can leave a question. I might read to them later, but before that, our topic today is gaming and social interactions. And for more on that, I pass it over to Mitra and Dr. B.
Well, apparently we have an echo.
Oh, we have an echo? That's even better. Why not? You know, that's great. Cool. We're gonna do that one. Is there an echo now?
Yes.
There's still an echo?
There's still, this guy's interfering with things. I feel sure.
Yeah. Strange DOS was it did exactly what I was about to do. I am the luckiest man on the face. I
don't know.
Oh, it's better.
It's better now?
Apparently fixed. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I won't be grabbing the stream audio today. So now that you've gotten the voice of God telling you the intro.
I still hear an echo.
You do?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
It's okay. I don't know why that. Do you have the stream up on the computer?
I do.
Try mute. Maybe the stream needs to be muted.
Oh, what a good yes, what a good idea.
Audio problems are the best, chat.
Dear
they're my favorite thing in the world. I spent the whole time panicking because that code that's up on the screen, I got that from the mod Sasha like 3 minutes ago. So
that's fantastic. I got to capture that so I can enter that into my Idle Champions game.
Someone says Treavor is no longer a stadium announcer. Very good.
Welcome to Champions. Anywho, Dr. B, Mitra, who are you and why are you so awesome?
Ooh. Well, I'm a registered clinical counselor working out of Victoria, BC. I don't know why I'm awesome. I leave that to others to judge.
Okay.
Well, should we answer this for each other?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, so I will jump in and say why Mitra is awesome. Mitra brings a really interesting and fantastic multicultural lens to the practice of psychology that we don't often see. For those of you who don't necessarily know the history of psychology, it's really rooted in Western European and often male Western European experiences. And that's something, thankfully, that's getting more of a lens. And with a lot of erudite grace, Mitra brings that lens to a lot of what we talk about.
Wow. Who is this person? Anyway, so Dr. B is
also
director.
straw finger puppets.
I love finger puppets. Ask my kids. I've been using finger puppets their whole life when they were very little. I even had made up ones sometimes where it's like, like that. Anyway, but to the point, Dr. B is clinical director at Take This, but well before that, Dr. B has a doctorate in psychology. He is a brilliant researcher. He also teaches about how clinicians like myself can use D&D to help their clients. He's extremely knowledgeable in the world of games, video games, and mental health. And he brings all of that together in this also wonderfully erudite and clear package. In other words, he explains it for those of us at home, how to clearly understand both the connection and the value of games and how to better understand our own mental health challenges.
See, I was going to say it was all neatly tied up in a neat bow tie.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Although I really wish he'd left the hats where they were.
I
but,
know.
we can't have everything.
The Mickey Mouse hats.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a lovely intro for both of you. I think that was a great way to do that. So the gaming and social interactions. Where do you all want to start with that?
I don't know. Part of me wants to. We didn't talk about this in our prep call yesterday, but part of me wants to debunk a couple of myths.
Oh, okay.
First of all, games do not make you violent.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We can get into a lot of the reasons why the violence research is flawed, but one of the stats that I really like to cite at people is that since like 1995 in the United States, game sales have gone up like 600% adjusted for inflation. I haven't looked at that stat in the last month, but it's like 600% adjusted for inflation. And violent crime has gone down roughly 23%. If games cause violent crime, we have very different definitions of the word cause.
I remember there was an episode of it was one of the Law and Orders, and it was about like they were like following this killer, and they're like, oh, he played video games, we'll figure out the crimes that he's gonna do by the video games he's playing. I'm like this episode is making me want to be more violent than any GTA I've ever played.
Well, so we have these things called ethics, all right? And because of ethics, we can't just hand kids knives and just see if they stab each other after playing video games. And so we have to come up with these approximations for real world violent behavior. And my favorite one's called the hot sauce paradigm, where if somebody's playing a violent video game, and the belief is if they load up the hot sauce more to hand to someone, they'll be more violent. But the problem is that these studies are quite often not looking at long-term violent behavior as opposed to momentary acts of quote unquote aggression, which could be better linked to things like momentary frustration. And also, just if it was my best friend on the end of the hot sauce, I'm loading it up. I don't care what I just did. And you do the same thing to me. We know this.
Yeah, I agree with that. My best friend and I did the exact same thing.
Right? It's like, oh, this is hot sauce. Load that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you go back far enough, people had all kinds of judgments about how damaging books could be.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And then they had all
Plato
kinds of
hated
worries
writing.
around TV. So I think anytime we have a new media, you have lots of judgment around it. I remember a fairly eminent child psychologist saying that, yeah, video games could really make you dysregulated. I feel, and I was thinking, yeah, but which genre are we talking about here? Because a book can make you dysregulated. I mean, I read the Amityville Horror when I was 13, and trust me, I was dysregulated for like a week.
Oh
I have a
God.
serious imagination, and I'd be like, there are red eyes, like right behind that curtain over there, in the middle of the night, like freaking terrified here, So, I mean, lots of things, lots of subject matter in media can be dysregulating, and it has very little to do with the genre.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I mean, but at this point, I mean, it's a numbers game. That the perpetrator played video games. Okay, Betty also drank water.
Yeah.
Let's look for all water drinkers.
I remember in high school, I heard about a kid that stole his dad's car, got chased by the cops, got out of that car, stopped someone else, pulled them out of their car, kept going, and the cops finally stopped him. When they stopped him, they're like, why did you do it? He's like, because I play GTA. And then his parents tried to sue Rockstar North, and the judge literally laughed it out of the court.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's just, that's one of those myths that the term that's often thrown about is called moral panic. It was a term created by a writer by the name of Stanley Cohen in his book Moral Panic in, I think, 1973. And he talked largely about the mods and the rockers in England.
Oh no, not those rockers.
The horror.
That Beatles music and all the damage it causes with such lyrics as "I want to hold your hand."
Yeah, real devil worship kind of things,
right?
Yep. Oh, good.
Well, the other one, I want to debunk, really, and this is a large crux of what we're talking about today, is the idea of video gamers as asocial. I don't want to say antisocial, because clinically speaking, for those of you who are playing the home game, antisocial doesn't mean you don't like being around people in a clinical sense. It means you violate the rights of others, criminal behavior. So the idea of gamers as asocial, isolated, pasty, living in mom's basement, that's an economic thing at this point, and it's just practical. All right. So it's not true. Games are inherently social.
Yeah.
I want people to take that away from this. Games are inherently social, and there are so many benefits. And I'm going to stop, just soapboxing into the camera and give Mitra a chance to talk.
Games are inherently social, and they're also really great for people to develop social skills. They're also a really great forum for people to be able to explore and experiment with parts of themselves that they otherwise might feel too anxious to bring into their daily life. And I've seen numerous instances where people try out different ways of behaving, maybe more social ways of behaving. Maybe they tell more jokes. Maybe they become a leader in their guild if they're playing a game that has a group component like that to it. And it makes a huge difference to their lives, because then they can feel what it's like to be that person without the anxiety that might otherwise be really difficult if they're in person with people. They can feel kind of safe because they're in their own space. They can take breaks, and they can come back and be that leader or that joker or that bard, whoever they find their voice within the context of the games.
I was telling you both yesterday that, like, I wouldn't have the personality that I do if it weren't for getting Xbox Live in junior year of high school and Halo 2 being such a big thing. Like, I played on there with a bunch of regular friends, and I got to try out being someone who I thought I wanted to be, but I just got to be them. I'm also realizing that the window is now just completely blowing me out, and I look like a ghost. Anywho, but, like, because of that, I got to try out, it's like, okay, I think this is my kind of humor. Oh, people are responding to that. Okay, that's my humor. And my way of talking and everything like that. And then once that group kind of fell apart and I got into college, I just took that into college and then suddenly found that I had a whole new group of friends, some of which I still have today. And it was all because I played Halo 2, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah, it may sound weird to someone who is not a game player, who doesn't engage in online worlds, but I think that it is absolutely true. It's certainly true for my life with my kids as well. We used to play World of Warcraft together, and we had people from all over the world in our guild. And one of the really beautiful things about that experience was it didn't matter how old you were. We had teens, we had people in their 60s and 70s, and we all kind of came together. And I think that breaking of barriers is another key value that playing games brings, because those 16-year-olds probably didn't think that they would necessarily have much in common with a 40-year-old woman, but it turned out that they did. And not only that, but they had some wonderful things to teach me about how to better play the game. And so it ended up being a really enjoyable, valuable experience. I'm still in touch with some of them today. No longer 16, married with kids of their own,
gosh.
actually. So
one of the funny things for me is I've had this voice since I was 15. So when I was like, I'm a 15-year-old, they're like, no, you're not. No, you're not.
You never had to ask your manager?
Oh, no, I did. But I was like, 12 or something like that, and then cracking all over the place.
Well, one of the, even, and I see some chat, in the chat, talking about people who play single player games. One of the myths that we hear all the time, and back when I used to work with people, because for those of you who have never watched this before, I do policy and education exclusively now. I don't work with clients, but back when I did, one of the biggest concerns that parents would come in with is that games were essentially a time waster, even the single player games. And I know, Mitra, you and I have talked about this. Like,
Yeah.
what are some of the common experiences that people come in with?
I think the underlying challenge for parents is, particularly if they aren't playing games themselves or joining their children in their gameplay, and they often aren't, is they don't understand what's going on, and they don't understand what their kids are doing, and it's not a world they necessarily inhabited themselves growing up. And so that's why they think of it as a time waster. They're mystified by why their kids would spend so much time doing this thing. And particularly in games where you're acquiring digital goods, in the sense that you're acquiring armor, you're getting more powerful, you're going up levels, they just don't get it. And they don't necessarily see that this is actually teaching their kids so much about getting mastery in something, about team play, about all of that. So what I see is this kind of mystification and, underlying upset about their role as parents, in that they don't feel that they're making responsible decisions. They're letting the game babysit, or the screen babysit their children, and that they're therefore being neglectful. So that's often an underlying concern to all of the other stuff that goes along with it. So, and nothing could be further from the truth, in my opinion. Obviously, if your kid is using games to exclusively as their go-to and their coping mechanism, that's something to look at. What's happening? What's missing? And of course, currently now, thanks to coronavirus, we really do need to look at how much are our kids socializing online. What are they learning from that? Let's engage with them about the game. Let's better understand what's happening.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned some of this stuff that I'm actually, as part of something Take This is doing next month, our research director, Dr. Rachel Cohort, and I are leading a series of parent trainings. And in my week of the parent trainings, I'm talking about some of the social emotional learning skills that are potentially present in various games.
Mm-hmm.
Social games especially, because this is on parenting, and we're going to talk about ways to use games to connect with your family. But even single player games, one of my absolute favorite games that I play on my own is called Death Squared, which is way funnier than it sounds. And it's where you have to simultaneously, operating on both joypads, move cubes around a trap-laden puzzle scape. And if you move one of them wrong, the other one dies. And you have to do this all simultaneously. And, you understand enough about how the brain works to know, how much of the cross communication is going on to exactly. It's amazing to me that so many parents and caregivers and teachers and even professionals, because there was some survey data that came out of Stetson University, I think in 2015, that at the time, roughly 1 out of 9 clinicians identified as gamers. When you've got over 200 million people playing video games in the United States, that is a huge discrepancy in terms of understanding the culture of things. And I wish parents would just get away from the idea of games as a time waster. There's so much richness there.
Mm-hmm. Again, I told you guys yesterday, but I'm gonna say for the chat, like one of the moments for me as a kid that was kind of nice and kind of like, it was like, I'm not actually wasting time like everybody says, is when my grandfather was and I were in the car, we were driving back from dinner, and I had Pokemon on my Game Boy Pocket, and I had my player's guide out on my lap, and he looks down at me and just goes, "Oh my God, you're reading." And that's a big thing for me. Like, I didn't read as a kid. Like, I would legit figure out ways to pretend I read the book for a book report. Like, I was way more interested in figuring out how to get out of it than to actually do it. And so when he saw me sitting there reading, he was like, I don't care. And you can play all these one. If you're reading, that's great. That's all that you can just keep doing that. You're not wasting time. And so that as a kid, that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to be ashamed of this. I'm doing something good.
Yeah. It's a moment for kids when they're like, wait a second, my parents don't, they're like, they're okay with this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I grew up reading comics. It was a big thing. Like, I spent a lot of time reading comics. My eldest pretty much learned to read, I think, with games manuals like Pokemon and Mario and a bunch of the other games he liked, because at that point, that's kind of a big thing.
Mhm.
Now, of course, it's all online anyway. But yeah, that was a huge factor in him learning to read for sure. So,
Well,
yeah.
one of the other things that you know, we talked about yesterday is the idea of ways that game, and you know, Trevor, you brought this up a little bit already, ways that games help us kind of find our way in the world.
Mhm.
An example I tell people all the time is you know, I'm autistic. I'm very open about that fact, and I didn't know that until my mid 30s. Everybody else spotted it long before I did, including some of the kids I worked with were like, "You're autistic, right?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And the like Dungeons and Dragons especially gave me this safe framework where without dire consequences I could try on and practice different social roles.
Mhm.
Video games did the same thing. You know, I loved single player RPGs for that reason. I could try out different, you know, hats, classes, whatever, and figure out how I wanted to be in the world. But the cool thing was, especially with Dungeons and Dragons, what I realized eventually is that all the character decisions were coming from me.
Mhm.
All the things I was doing was coming from me. And if I could do that at the gaming table, why couldn't I do that outside of the gaming table? So I started to externalize those skills that I was learning in the games.
Yeah.
You know, I would say Final Fantasy II in the United States was a big influence on my code of ethics that, you know, got to save things and be.
Well, that's actually
good.
something I kind of wanted to talk about real quick because I saw it in the chat was about single player games, and it's like we do have social interactions with multiplayer games in Dungeons and Dragons, but I do think that there is something to be said about single player games also helping you figure out social interactions at a young age. Like, especially with RPGs now that have just, you know, 3 paragraphs of dialogue options to say. And you can try out seeing like, okay, I'm going to be a jerk to this person. And then you're a jerk to them. And then you're like, oh, I don't feel good about that.
Yeah.
That was me with
Yeah.
Fable.
Oh, yeah. And Knights of the Old Republic,
Yeah.
or Jade Empire, all the BioWare games.
Yeah.
That, oh my God, those were so hard to do as dark side playthroughs for me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. 100%.
So guilty. So guilty.
Yeah, I remember this one moment in WoW where my character had to torture someone. It felt really gross, you know. But I think that's and there are games that are actually designed to do this, where you actually get to experience things from that perspective of being like violent or sociopathic, or you know, and that's okay. Like, I think that's kind of an important way to ask yourself, to have that sort of feedback within yourself. I'm noticing that there's this question of not just single player games, and those not being somehow as social, but also the length of time people play is worrying sometimes for parents and those watching the game. So addressing the single player game piece first. People often discuss single player games together, like after the fact or while they're playing them. And people enjoy watching someone else doing a playthrough of a game. You know, there's so many playthroughs on Twitch, on YouTube, all over the place. And we still seem to enjoy engaging with people that way. And there's often communities that build up around these playthroughs. So there is that, as well as just talking with our friends. And then in the multiplayer games, the beauty of that is having to work with people. And I think the worry around length of time It's really hard in a multiplayer game when you're trying to do something like a raid or a dungeon or any of these more coordinated, larger scale events. It is hard to do those in a short time.
Yeah.
And I think it's helpful for parents and those who don't play as much to kind of, instead of making a judgment, like check in with the person playing, like what's going on, okay, then what's your availability and how can we make sure that our other needs outside of these game worlds get met as well. So yeah.
I'm not at all going to say a football game is as long as a raid, but like I remember as a kid being like, Grandpa, I am hungry. And he's like, hold on, it's almost halftime. But then later on, when he's just like, kid, it's time to eat. And I'm just like, I got to take a picture of the Snorlax or I'm going to miss this whole level. And he's like, I don't understand. I'm like, we just had this conversation the other way.
What's a Snorlax? Oh, fourth down. Gotta go. How dare they do a fake pun on fourth down?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. This is really big. I had a friend one time who found D&D to just be the nerdiest thing. He didn't want anything associated with it. We'd start talking about it, he'd walk away. Then one time he shows up to our group and he's just like, dude, my fantasy football team is doing so good. They did this, and he's going through the whole thing. And I'm just like, oh yeah, no, that's just like last weekend when Kyle got a critical hit against a red dragon and won the whole thing for the whole party. And he goes, what? And I go, now you know how I feel.
Yeah, I know it's cliche, but fantasy football is basically D&D for the kids who used to beat me up.
It is.
Strahd knows how you feel.
Strahd's out again. All right, let's talk about my feelings. All right.
But I saw at the beginning of Mitra's thing back there, Dr. B, you look like you were stretching to say something there.
Oh yeah. Oh, let's talk about this. This is the feeling time, the idea of time. First of all, you brought up the example of football and multiplayer games, and this is what a lot of caregivers, parents, teachers don't realize is these raids are akin to football practice. Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you understand where what your kids are doing, pulling the plug on them because they're playing too much, just instantaneously pulling the plug, that is the same as driving to football practice and pulling them out. Yeah. That is not just, I mean, that is going to have social ramifications for your kid. Now, mm-hmm. Suddenly they're less reliable. Mm-hmm. They're standing within their friend group, and online friend groups those are real relationships. Yeah. They don't have all of the same benefits as in-person interactions. They actually have some additional benefits that in-person interactions don't. But the idea of just instantaneously pulling them out, you would probably never do that at baseball practice, wrestling practice, anything like that, any other team sport. And if you consider these multiplayer games, these raids that people are regularly going on, scheduling, reliability, mm-hmm. accountability, team building skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
crucial.
The other thing with that, and I don't know how it is nowadays because I'm 33 years old. I haven't been in high school, and my mom's pulled me away from a game that long. Now when I have to leave a game, it's because my cat got stuck in the cabinet or something. But it's like, the weird thing for me back then was that, like, yeah, you're right. If I was at Little League practice and my mom pulled up and she's like, get in the car now, people would be like, who died? Is everything okay? And there would be concern and panic. But in video games, when it was like, guys, I gotta go, my mom's telling me I gotta get off, everyone's like, yeah, it's okay, we get it. Because, like, that was the thing. That was expected. That was the norm of, like, yeah, we get it. Nobody, they want you to stop playing. We get it.
But that's different now. I mean, it's different. Well, I mean, especially you've got these long, I can't play certain games anymore. Because I don't have the time to play certain mm-hmm. games anymore. Like, I played Destiny 2 when it first came out, and I was like, okay, cool. Suddenly, a week later, everybody else is at power max level. I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't keep up with that. But the complexity of certain games and the commitment involved for certain games and the team building aspects involved in certain games are amazing to me. And I would be mortified for a parent or a teacher to do that in most other contexts. It would be unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just take your kids the goalie in the soccer game. You're angry with them because they didn't do their homework, so you pull them out of the game.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the big piece, right? It's the devaluing of what is a resource to your child.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because you're disconnected from your kid then, and you're not actually recognizing and valuing their resources, and yet you still expect them to recognize and value yours, so that when
Yeah.
you tell your kid, this is an important thing in the household and we all need to do our
This is
part.
a big game.
Yeah, right. And then your kid's like, yeah, but like, you don't care about my world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think obviously there's a balance. As parents, I have had 3 kids. I do expect them to do chores and to help out and to be part of the family, etc. But part of that is also recognizing and acknowledging their time and how they want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if games were getting in the way of their chores or their homework, or occasionally family time or the dinner table, if we're all sitting down together, which we do a few times a week. We don't do it every night.
Yeah.
But then I would be like, yeah, what's going on? Why is this your only resource? I want my kids to have a balanced life. And to me, that means like, let's go for multiple resources. Let's look at your creativity. Let's look at some time outdoors or your physical health, right? Let's look at you learning adult skills that you're going to need when you do move out finally, when there's no coronavirus and my eldest can get on with the things he'd like to do. But but in the meantime, while you have your kids at home, there is this piece around really valuing their hobbies, their life, their choices, what they're interested in.
Yeah.
Because that's what we all expect from our most connected relationships, is that somebody is going to respect and value those things which are important to me. And what are we teaching our kids if we're saying, oh no, you should expect to have relationships where people don't actually respect and value those things that you enjoy doing with your time?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Absolutely. And I God, this is just, it's hearkening back to so many conversations I've had with teachers and parents and whatnot. This idea of individuation as a developmental milestone, learning to be an autonomous person away from your parents. And one of the questions I used to ask a lot of them is, okay, so you're concerned that your kid is just spending all of their free time playing these video games. Yeah, okay. But they're still doing their homework. Yeah. They're meeting with friends, admittedly online, but they're meeting with friends. Yeah. They're doing all their chores at home. Yeah. So you're concerned that your child is using their free time in a way that they want instead of how you want.
Yep.
And it's not interfering in any way. And that was always an awkward conversation, because free time, I mean, as an adult, you think about it, you get to use your free time however you want. As long as it's not interfering with other things. And boy, this is just so many soapboxes for me.
Real quick before we keep going, let me do the mid-show disclaimer just to remind our viewers and listeners, the behind-the-scenes thing for this. Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability. We assume no liability for the use of this information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your best judgment. Now, what I wanted to do real quick is someone in the chat, and I'm sorry I missed it now, was talking about it being about balance. And I think that is something to kind of circle back on. We're not saying just let kids play games all the freaking time.
No.
No. Like,
no.
Yeah.
No.
Stuff got to get done.
Yeah.
So I want to address this because it comes up a lot with clients. And it feels like when I am pro games in any way, and I have to be so careful about this, because what comes up is this idea that because I'm pro games, I'm not seeing my client's point of view, which is the parent point of view in this instance. My younger clients love it and really appreciate that I get it. But I think that as soon as it sounds, I think this is because we have this really opposition. We have this idea that I'm not saying this very well. There's an extreme perspective here where either you're for it or you're against it. And there's very little talk about the middle road around kids and games. So as soon as I, as a professional, say, well, I think it's great that they're doing all this stuff online with their friends and so on, it feels like I must then be against the parent who's striving for balance. And I've seen it come up in the chat a couple of times. Please understand that as a parent and as a clinician, I hugely strive for balance. I think it is really important that as kids get older, even if they're not adults, but they're living in your home, maybe that some of them are young adults, it is important that we teach them how to have balance in their lives. And that means doing the chores. As you get older, you get more responsibility. And that's an important piece of this. No, I don't want my child playing games till 2 a.m. if they have school the next day, even if it's virtual school, right? I want to teach them that, no, that's going to impact your life negatively and you're going to be super tired.
Well, it's also like, it's not just video games. Like if a kid was like, I'm going to shoot hoops in the driveway until 2 a.m. on a school, I'd be like, no.
Exactly.
I'm going to go to football practice till 2 a.m. every night.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
No, don't do that.
The same rules apply in that I have an expectation that they're going to gain the tools and skills to do their lives, and that they're going to figure out where in that games and really most forms of technology fit. There was a local school that decided to take away kids' cell phones. And at first, this sounded like a great idea to a lot of parents that, okay, during the day, they're not going to be distracted by their cell phones, blah, blah, blah. What they realized was that, I now can't call my kid before pickup. I now can't text them to make sure that they're going to be, I needed to remind them about that doctor's appointment they need to walk to, and now I suddenly can't. Because your technology is so much more than entertainment. And I think this is a crucial piece here. Your kid is going to be sitting at their computer to do their schoolwork or to play League of Legends. We want them to self-regulate around how they do this. And by creating I'm going to confiscate this thing, we're not allowing for that regulation to take place. They have to learn how to figure it out, and we have to side with them and, of course, take a stand, particularly when they're younger, on a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is something I get heated about because of what Mitra brought up, that this isn't a dichotomous, you're for us or you're against us type of thing. That one of the things I hope, as gamers are getting older, and at this point the average gamer based on data, survey data, is 36. As gamers have gotten older, one of my hopes is that we can just move beyond the moral panic that the idea that games are bad or, that games are good in all ways, that with any advent of new technology, there are upsides and there are downsides. And we have to honestly be able to address both of them in order to appropriately teach the next generation the skills to self-regulate. That's... God, just like Mitra said, let's get beyond this dichotomous thinking of good or bad. If you're pro games, you're against parenting. It's just not. It doesn't. It's not that simple.
I like to point out to people, I'm like, there's like gamers that have kids, right? Like they can't be against themselves, and they've seemed to work out pretty well.
Yeah. It's yeah.
I thought this would be a good time to transition to one other point that we wanted to hit, because I did see it in the chat at one point, which is distraction versus avoidance.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mitra, you want to start on that one?
Sure. So actually, you know what? No, Dr. B, you had you very quickly yesterday summed up the difference between the two. Do you want to do that first?
Yeah, sure. So distraction and avoidance behavior on the outside can look the same. All right. That's the whole bugaboo, and why really honest conversations have to happen with people about their behaviors if you're concerned at all. That's why therapists are so great at doing things, and I recommend talking to therapists if you ever have concerns about this. As a broad topic, distraction behaviors are just saying, you know what, I can handle what I need to handle, just not right now. I'm gonna take a break. Whereas avoidance behaviors are going la 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 la, I can't do this, la 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 la, but outwardly the behavior may look the same, and that's a big deal. And that's where a lot of exploration happens, is the motivations for those behaviors. And distraction behaviors are real healthy. We all do it. Avoidance,
Exactly. So if someone has had a really tough day, right? They've come home, they're exhausted, they've had a busy 6 hours or 8 hours at school or work, and they just need a break. And it's not interfering with their responsibilities. Like, they still get dinner or do the things that they have to do, but they just need to check out for a while, and play a game or read a book or whatever it is they're doing. That is a healthy use of distraction. That's not avoiding from the responsibilities that they have, but it's taking time out to self regulate. So, distraction is a great tool for regulation in that way. And I'll often talk with people about this. You know what? If you've done everything you can and now you're just super anxious and worried about something, but there's really nothing you can do to change the situation, you've done all the things that you can do. You're waiting, for example, for the results of a job interview, or you've done the exam and now you're just having to sit around waiting for the results. It's okay to distract. That's a great time to distract. It'll help soothe you a little bit. It'll help give you something else. And distraction is often where we can engage with a resource that's actually really good for us, whether that be a game, a book, a cup of tea, a little bit of something creative. That's what we're using it for. If we're avoidant, we're not functioning. I'm just never leaving the house, right? That's not healthy. Let's figure out how you can leave the house. Do you need company? Do you need, a friend? Do you need to be driving? Do you need to look at the things you can do to make that thing manageable? And sometimes a little distraction along the way. I'll go for a walk and I'll take my dog with me, and the dog will distract me from being worried about who I'll run into. You see what I'm saying? As opposed to I'm just never leaving the house. So that's how we can use distraction as a healthy tool, and it doesn't become avoidant.
This was just brought up in the chat that the idea of using this stuff when you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And, again, I'm autistic, and I do that because games can be really immersive for me when I'm overwhelmed and I need to kind of let the emotions pass to the point that they're not so loud and I can actually process what I'm feeling. I mean, part of the challenge is, and I want to break away from the idea of games as this monolithic construct, because not all games are the same. Some people, and this is really individualized, some people have different challenges or different immersion levels with different games. Like, I played World of Warcraft one time, okay? One time. It was in grad school. My friend was like, hey, you should try this. And I did. And when I looked up at the clock and it was 8 hours later, I just went, oh no, I can't play this. Oh, this is a terrible idea.
Yep.
I cannot play this. But that's me. Other people can pick that up and put it down. It turns out, with my autism, counting, level progression, building things are kind of a hyper-focused thing for me. And so World of Warcraft, not a good idea for me. But that's deeply personal and gets into some of what Mitra's saying of having conversations with self, with a therapist, with whomever, to figure out the motivator behind certain behaviors and where they may or may not, distract.
Exactly. I also played World of Warcraft for many years, in fact. Man, Shadowlands dropped and I still haven't had a chance to play. And I miss it. But yeah, I think you really have to know yourself. And that's where I think having good friends or family members or a therapist just kind of help you look at that. what is happening when you're using games. Is it distraction? Is it avoidance? Where's the value? What are you learning? Because it's not as simple as this is just all a bad idea, right? That game or particular MMO might not be the best idea for you. It's true.
Not for me.
And
MMOs
that's okay.
are a
That's
terrible
really
idea for
good
me.
to know. Yeah, I mean, because I have ADHD, I definitely have been known to struggle with hyperfocus. On the plus side, it's really helped me understand. You'll hear people say things like, well, if they can focus on this, why is it so hard to focus on that? ADHD doesn't work that way, people.
I heard that so many times
Right?
as a kid.
Why don't they just apply themselves?
And,
It's
like,
further-
one of my favorite moments of that, I was reading, again, reading was rough for me, and so when I found a book that I dove into, it was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And the Halo novels did that for me, and I hadn't even played the games yet. I was just like, oh, I don't have an Xbox, I can read a book and get it. So I was obsessively reading those through class. And like, I remember my English teacher was like, why aren't you reading what I assigned? I'm like, because it's about a boring French dude waiting for another boring French dude. This is about Halo, guns and aliens and cool.
Vladimir and Estragon, Master Chief.
Yeah, you know.
Waiting for Plasma Sword, waiting for Godot. I don't know.
That plasma sword. Yeah, no, so yeah, I know plenty of times where like I was focused on a genre book, and they're like, well, why can't you read this? I'm like, it doesn't interest me, and I can't stress to you enough how much when something doesn't interest me, I will drop it like a sack of potatoes. Like, it's just gone.
Yeah. I think that's a key piece of this, as well, in terms of understanding yourself and what's going to actually engage you and what will engage your kids. Just really grasping that around games. If a game is going to get your kid to read, fabulous. If there's a book that engages in that same world, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do we want to teach them balance? Yes, of course. Because that's a key part of surviving in the world, is being able to do that task switching, which can be very difficult for some people. I know it was hugely and still is a challenge for me. I have to talk myself down from not reading a book till 4 a.m. People like, is that any better? Like, come on, let's think about that. It's not actually materially a different experience then,
I will say, though,
So-
between my wife playing a game till 4 a.m. or reading a book till 4 a.m., one is a lot easier for me to sleep through.
Definitely.
Also, I gotta call this out real quick. Babylon Ranger in the chat said, and the third boring French dude never even shows up anyways.
Well, thanks for spoiling it. I never got through that play.
What's funny is, as an adult, I really liked it. But no, the having the hyper focus things on one thing, and especially like in gaming, and I know as a teenager, distinguishing between me having a hyper focus on that and it being a distraction or an avoidance I didn't get it. I didn't understand when I was using it for what. And I mean, I probably didn't know until like my mid-20s where I realized, like, oh, that might be what I'm doing.
Oh, you mean when your frontal lobe fully developed? Oh my goodness.
There's a question that I kind of want to address in the chat. With ADHD, how do you regulate having to do things you have no interest in?
Ooh.
That is absolutely a huge challenge with ADHD. I think that Dr. B has a partner who has a fantastic YouTube channel called How to
ADHD.
Yeah.
I've recommended it a couple of times.
I think it's a wonderful resource. And I can't speak as a clinician to this in this context here that we're in, but I can tell you that for me, my Apple Watch has been really helpful. I use timers. It's the most helpful thing actually has been to acknowledge when I'm doing a task I have no interest in. Paperwork's always a challenge for me. I have to make sure that I really speak very firmly to myself to get certain things done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I will do is, like, I will straight up parenting myself. I'm like, you don't get to do that thing you're obsessed with right now until this boring crap gets done.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. Good.
Oh, I do environmental management, basically contingency control, because it's so easy for me. It's so easy for me to get distracted because a lot of folks on the autism spectrum in the DSM, it's actually, they say that just assume we have ADHD like symptoms. Just assume it. You often don't need to diagnose them separately. Just assume. But so what I do is I set routines. Routines are so amazingly helpful for me. Like, I am up at a certain time, I'm doing a certain task by a certain time, and if I don't stick to that routine, it's an avalanche effect for me through the rest of the day. It's way harder for me to get back onto track than to be with that routine in the first place. But I also do things like I put various website lockers on my computer and program lockers for certain hours of the day, because I part of what I do for a living is play games, and so it's real easy just to double click Borderlands. What do you mean I'm not working on that thing I was supposed to be working on? I'm getting a new epic loot.
Yeah. Oh no, getting a high state or high in PC and doing all my work on here, and then getting a text from my friends like, hey, that really rare mod is up in Destiny 2 right now, you can just go grab it. And I'm just like, oh, I could just go in and get it real quick. Oh no, I'm doing a strike. No.
Strahd has decided that he needs a video game. He's listening to this conversation with great interest, and he's like, oh.
Sorry, I will enslave all the people in Morovia.
Morovia. It's Morovia, but I like Morovia. Strahd approves of the idea.
Yeah, it's the sequel to Barovia. It's Morovia.
Moreover, I'll be everywhere now. Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of the show, and I do want to read this one, Dr. B, to get some input on it. This is not to be negative towards you or anything like that. This was also in a conversation in the chat, but for some reason, high functioning really bugs me for some reason. I don't know why it bugs me. When someone talks about you being ASD, is there any terms that just drive you mad? We are all unique, and what bugs me may not be the same for you.
I have a sort of unique perspective on that, because my experience straddles the line of both worlds, the clinical and the colloquial. And that high functioning label is a clinical term that I have a big beef about my industry and how we haven't done enough to educate people on the way we use terms. Even things like mild depression. Well, to a lot of folks, that would be no big deal. But the thing is, even something like mild depression is still massively significant and impactful in their life, enough that they got that diagnostic label. And so mild is only a relative clinical term in terms of its clinical impact. It already has significant enough impact that they get that depression diagnosis. And so that high functioning label, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me because I understand the clinical usage of that word. But I think where it runs into problems is in the rest of the world. That my industry hasn't done a good enough job in educating people on. Just because someone is high functioning, and technically that that would be my label, there's still significant impact. There has to be massive significant impact to get a diagnosis in the first place. My autism is massively impactful on my ability to maintain relationships. And I will start crying if I get into it too much here. But those mild labels, those high functioning labels, those are in relative clinical terms. And so that's, in terms of other things, terms that really just make me angry about things, I'm pretty chill about most terms, as long as the follow-up words after them are respectful. That's the big thing. If their behavior and their follow-up language is respectful, I'm pretty chill about most things.
Okay.
I think we all just want to be treated as human beings who are deserving of respect and value. And I think sometimes it feels like the clinical terms can, for an individual, undermine that sense of being equal and equally worthy in the world. And if I'm not sure what's underlying it for, the lovely person who wrote in with that comment, but it can feel diminishing, either diminishing of the seriousness of your, how your experience in the world can be challenging for you, and also diminishing that, other people might see you as either, well, then you're equally capable of doing everything like me, and they miss out on the variability in your experience, and they don't see what you see. And I think that's pretty difficult to someone who's not neurotypical either. I get that. And as someone who's, if I look at it through a cultural lens, um, sometimes people miss the my experience as someone of color, for example. Like, not to change the subject from the piece around autism or clinical terms, but just to understand sometimes these experiences leave out broad swaths of who we are and how we experience the world. So.
Yeah. I like to think of clinical language as painting a picture in broad strokes. And that's how I understand it. It's a shorthand way to communicate a lot of information about possible manifestations to other clinicians. I used this example before and I'll use it again. There's 9 symptoms of depression, of which you must meet 5. Okay. Something like, there's thousands of variations. And if someone were to communicate to me that someone has a depression diagnosis, that gives me a rough idea of what they may be experiencing. It's up to me to figure out, if I was still working with people, what their individual experience is. And I think that's just a short circuit between clinical language and colloquial usage that I hope I can try and fix in some small way.
We're going to do one more question. I'm going to put this one out there. I don't know if this one is appropriate. I'm still learning which questions, are good to ask and which ones are not. But Barney9 says, any recommendations for a parent going through a potential diagnosis of autism? I'm a bit worried.
Well, for individual recommendations, we can't give those, but that sounds like a great thing to talk with a mental health professional about. If you've got very individualized worries, a good mental health professional is going to be able to help you with your individualized worries in a way we never could.
Yeah.
But a book I particularly like on the topic of autism, Tony Attwood's writings are really great. I like Tony Attwood's writings.
Okay. I think we're going to wind things down here. Dr. B. Mitra, thank you so much for this conversation. This was fantastic. I hope everybody in the chat enjoyed it. Mitra, Dr. B, where can people find you?
So at Mitra Jordan is just fine. I also have a website, mitrajordan.com. And there's contact information. You can always feel free to email me or just find me on Twitter. Yeah.
And my information's like right there. That's where I am on all the socials. The Dr. B, two E's, because couldn't get just Dr. B. That was taken.
We're gonna get it one day. I know it. We're gonna get it.
It's the Dr. B on all the things. And every other, I'm streaming on Mondays, whether it's for Take This or over at Geeks Like Us for Clinical Role with a bunch of mental health types. I'm streaming on Mondays and every other Tuesday. So, follow me, follow Take This at TakeThis.org and check it all out.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at the Treavor. You can also find me on Difficulty Class on Fridays. We talk about D&D and have some fun. But I want to thank Sasha for moderating today, Codename Entertainment, and Take This for letting us have these conversations in an open space. And we really do hope that everybody enjoyed the conversation. And we hope that you'll be here with us next week in the chat at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on twitch.tv/CNE Games. But until then, take care of yourself.